County. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman, and to quote the immortal Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm back. However, I'm back because Dave Carr was doing the Politically Speaking show since the 1st of September, and I want to express my appreciation to to Dave. I've got Terminator on my mind. Dave Carr for sitting in this seat and for covering the municipal campaign incredibly well. I did watch many of the shows, and it was good to see, as well as election night, which had a few surprises. But it was a good municipal campaign, and we're looking forward to the rest of the season of Politically Speaking, bringing you all the political figures in our local area, and certainly some new ones. However, to begin our post-election coverage on Politically Speaking, I want to welcome Mayor Ian Boddy of the City of Owen Sound. Ian, you're no stranger to Politically Speaking, but welcome back.
Oh, it's good to be here.
And we're in person too, because yeah.
Without masks on and everything.
Without masks, and we're in person, and it almost feels the way it was. Almost. Anyway, you were victorious.
I survived, yes. Yeah. Sense of relief, sense of tired, sense of excitement looking forward.
Yeah.
Reinvigorated.
Now, you did something that you may not have done as much of in your previous campaigns. You did a lot of door knocking, a lot of door to door this time.
2014, the first time I got to, or as a team, we got to just about every door in town. Mm-hmm. This time it was a little bit harder, partly rain. We got to 2,500 doors. Mm-hmm. We're just under 2,500. I personally spoke to 300 to 400 people. Different approach. A friend of mine gave me a book called Listen Like a Dog. Mm-hmm. So instead of going and talking about what I wanted to do, I started everything out with, there's issues that you want to discuss, any questions you want to ask me, any suggestions or criticisms, and then waited for the discussion to start. So it was really interesting. Rewarding, interesting, fun to go and talk to people. Sometimes it's a localized issue, sometimes it's a little bit bigger. So it was fascinating.
You know, if I remember one of your predecessors, actually it was Deb Haswell, saying to me that she absolutely loved the door-to-door canvassing when she was running, because she got a real flavor of what people were thinking. She got a real flavor of how people felt about the key issues which were important to them, and she said, okay, so you take a little heat.
Well, there's times that I had 20 minutes conversations, and it might be about, my grandchild, and he works at, and it was just going out and talking to people, and some of it was, all of it was fun and interesting. I didn't get lit up too many times with, the odd angry person, but most of the time it was really good discussion, and then they raised their issue, and I took a piece of paper and was writing down notes, and in some cases I was able to phone the works department and get whatever fixed, in their neighborhood immediately. And it's simple things that were overlooked, but it's a neighborhood issue. So.
Absolutely, because I've heard other incumbents say the same thing, that one of their advantages is that they know who to talk to get a very local issue. Like you say, It could be a busted curb.
Yeah.
Get it fixed or get it noted and get action on it. So that may be sort of an incumbent advantage. On the other hand, a newcomer can listen with fresh ears.
Yep.
So it cuts both ways.
Certainly. It was interesting at one of the all candidates meetings, I think new candidate or newly elected councillor or to be, John Farmer made a comment that it's too bad we only go out every 4 years. And so that's something we want to think about in the coming years of, should we be going out as a group more often? Should we go out each spring for a couple of Saturday mornings and knock on different doors and have chats? And how do you engage the community? So
Yeah, I think that's an interesting concept because politicians are accused of being insulated on one hand,
Yep.
but at the same time, the municipal level of government is the closest level of government to the people, and you as elected representatives are the closest to both the government on one side, or the structure on the other side, and the people on the other. So that's an interesting idea.
My brother lives in Vancouver. He's got a friend who's just retired from the provincial parliament out there, John Yap, and he's out every Saturday morning for 4 years, in between elections, just talking to people. I had suggested that to a few councillors in the last term, and it wasn't an interest, or we just didn't get around to it. But I think going forward, we've got an opportunity to do things like that and just go out and listen.
And it has the advantage over a public meeting because you approach people on their own terms,
Yeah.
their own turf. Instead of a gathering place, which is basically, excuse the word, a setup and controlled. But if you go to, and I was talking with one candidate about this, the difference is that when you go to someone's home, you're on their turf, or your doorstep, you're on their turf. They're in control. They can give you a great compliment, or they can be brutally honest.
Well, and I discussed this with Dave on election night. When you're chairing a meeting and you've got an agenda to go through, those public question periods aren't necessarily a good place to have a dialogue. They're really there to ask a question and to try and move forward. So we can rethink how we do that. And it doesn't work at a council meeting just as well as maybe having a town hall with all of council and just an open discussion, and different ideas that have come out of the last few weeks. That
yes, I noticed that you did say that at the last council meeting, that these questions are not the best forum for it. Isn't a discussion. That's what you said, and that's fair. That's
well, in our last council meeting, there was an agenda that came with it, and it was as stated in the paper, it was to disrupt the council meeting, which isn't productive either. So that's why it's better to have a meeting that you can go and have a discussion, and hopefully more people come and feel comfortable coming and talking.
Well, this leads into another subject that we had a brief conversation before the show about, but I think is a concern across this province at the municipal level, and that is the voter turnout, which is often interpreted as a sign of voter engagement and the level of public engagement in the democratic process. I mean, I've got my own ideas on that, but I'm not. I know in the case of there's been big concern expressed about Toronto, because Toronto had 29% of voter turnout, and the consensus seems to be, and it was funny, it was almost the headline in the Toronto Star, to quote Bill Davis's old line, "Bland works." John Tory was elected to a 3-year term because he wasn't confrontational. He wasn't. He gets stuff done, but it's not with a great deal of energy. At the same time, here in Owen Sound, we had 39% turnout, which is slightly lower than previous elections, but not.
No, that's too low.
I agree, but
not included in that conversation enough is this thing called COVID that has taken 2 years out of our memory and out of our time frames, and people disengaged during that. They spent time at home with their families. Everything changed. Certainly the provincial election in the spring was down in participation. It's down right across the province. You can interpret that as satisfaction with what's going on. Certainly the people I talked to at the door, I got satisfaction from people that some people were engaged. Some people, even when they're engaged and had questions, they were paying attention. The stats that I was keeping, I expected a higher turnout. But there is a satisfaction, and I think a lot of those people just didn't bother to vote.
That may well be true. What do you think I've had this conversation before with municipal clerks. the idea of the issue around the separate voters lists. Do you think that has an impact on the turnout? Because a lot of people said, well, where do I vote? What do I do? Et cetera, et cetera. They're still not quite as in tune with the municipal system, which has each municipality with a separate voters list. But I understand 4 years from now, that will change, that the province will take over the management of it. There'll be a central permanent registry for the municipal system, which is a huge job, but they have to do it.
I've heard that. I haven't had that discussion with clerks, but I have heard that the province wants to take it over. Certainly the list is kept by MPAC, I believe, or compiled by MPAC, so it shouldn't be that difficult for the province to take it over.
Well, let's hope that inches things up a little bit. Yeah. I think the other thing, a couple of other things I wanted to raise about our local election here in Owen Sound. With turnout of 39%, or about 6,200 votes, 80% of the votes were on the internet. 10% were at help centers, 10% on the phone. And what did you hear at the door about that internet voting?
Well, about the second door I knocked on, I asked the gentleman if he would be voting, and I started off asking, will you be voting? And then, can I count your vote? And I actually quit asking both of those. But the gentleman first of all said, yeah, I always vote. And then he stopped and said, well, actually, I won't be able to vote. I'm blind. I can't get to the polls. And when I said, you'll be able to use your telephone or a computer this time, he smiled, and I gave him the city pamphlet, and he was excited that he was going to be able to use the telephone, which, if you phone a bank or you phone anything, you push 1 to wait, push 2 to wait longer, push 3 to wait longer, press 4 for French, and
don't even try calling the telephone company, because you wait even longer than that.
Yeah. So we're more accustomed to using phones. So for him, he was looking forward to it. And I talked to someone else that had mobility issues that had voted already, and were quite thrilled with how easy it was. So I believe Kenya, of all places, leads the world in per capita use of online or telephone banking. And so as technology gets spread further and more people have computers and more people are on the internet, then it becomes easier for all. Certainly the goal is to try and get those people under the age of X, 40 or whatever the magic number is, engaged and easier to vote. I've got a 24-year-old son whose life is on his telephone, of course, and so, the idea is to try and get that next generation out to vote and make it easier for them. They may not go to a poll or want to go to a poll, so hopefully that works in the long run. I suspect it will come back. I'm hoping that 39% is the lowest ever, and that we can re-engage the public. And as issues come forward, we get out of that COVID hangover, or whatever you want to call it, that we can move forward and re-engage.
Sure. I think the other thing about telephone voting is, for some people, or internet voting, and I heard this from several seniors, was that they weren't quite sure, but they followed the instructions exactly as they were on their voting letter, and they said, that was easy. They were quite impressed.
Once they get into it, there's some that had trouble with it and phoned, and they could walk them through on what button to push and where to key. And
the other thing that I appreciated, and I noticed this in contrast to other municipalities across this area, was the results were bang. They were there. They were at 8:30 in the evening. They were there. And I must confess, I was refreshing my phone, refreshing my phone, but there it was. It was there.
There it was.
That was great.
Yeah, it was. It was a stressful night, so I was glad at 8:30, whatever it was, that there's the results. And thinking back to at least 2 elections ago, 2010, 2014, that you're waiting for the numbers to come in all night, and it was.
Well, here at Rogers, they were saying that I think it was the Meaford Mayor's contest. It was after midnight.
Yeah, it got later. Yeah. Yep. So that makes for.
Yeah. Well, the voice in my head is telling me that the council was released at 5 to 11 and the mayor's result was released at 10 to 12.
Okay. So I was up that late.
Yes, you were up that late. We sometimes refer to that as the time the last dog is hung.
Well, no, I was, we were packed up and home just shortly after 11, but I know the stuff in my head was continuing to run, so I know
yes.
I was looking at the internet and checking things.
One of the things that I've heard from a number of candidates is the physical toll and emotional toll that a candidate that running takes on a candidate. And I say that because there's several candidates have mentioned that to me. You're emotionally engaged with people all the time if you're out doing door to door. Physically demanding. Do you know how many stairs there are in Owen Sound?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I do. Last Friday we did over 17,000. My friend had that was knocking on doors with me, had an Apple phone, and he was over 17,000. I know I went a little bit further, and Saturday was much the same. Hips and legs were really tired. I started in early September just by myself, trying to do 40 to 60 doors a night for 2 or 3 nights a week. There's some places that there's a lot of hills, there's a lot of stairs, and you're gassed when you get to the top. And it was about trying to manage energy, trying to make sure I was in bed a little bit earlier, trying to, some nights it was easy to get to bed and get to sleep. I was worn out, but just trying to manage that energy so you don't become too tired and start to become cranky with people.
That's an occupational hazard too. But I think I was talking to my mail carrier yesterday, and I was mentioning this, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, downtown Owen Sound is really, really bad for stairs." He said that as a mail carrier, he has the seniority, he doesn't do those routes anymore, but he said 5, 6 steps, older houses, you're up and down a lot, it's hard.
Fifth Avenue West and about 18th to 20th Street or 20th Street in through that area, there's a lot of hills. Up around Summit Place, there's a lot of hills and a lot of steps up to houses, and they must have some great views from
they do.
A couple of those houses.
Yeah. Well, lessons learned, I guess.
Yeah, it's fun to get out to some of those neighborhoods that, we all tend to drive along the main streets, and we don't get into the secondary streets and the third tertiary streets. And there's some really nice neighborhoods in this town that you don't think about.
I've heard that also said by other candidates, that they came to appreciate the not just Owen Sound, but the differing neighborhoods that we have in the city. They are of many different characters. They are different architectural styles. Even the streets are laid out differently.
Yeah, and you know what? That's something architecture. A few times we stopped and said, "Look at the brickwork at the top of that. Have you ever noticed that before?" No, I've driven past it 50 times and never. There's some really neat brickwork in this town on houses that, when you're walking, you've got time to see it and look around and.
Yeah, there is. You've probably seen some of the houses that have a pebble. They're mortar and pebble instead of mortar and brick fronts.
Yep.
I did learn the story about that. And that is, there was a gentleman, I believe his name was John Mayo, and he's deceased now. And it was John Pretty who told me about this. John, of course, the photographer.
Yeah, yep.
John said that he remembers him as a child doing this in a number of houses. He was a mason, and this was his unique style. So if you see that pebble and mortar technique, it's unique to Owen Sound, and it's also done by this one specific person. And I've never seen that documented, but it's an oral memory. Kind of cool.
Well, and there's another local, we're going totally sideways. There's another
are.
local thing about the ceilings and Miller work.
Yes,
and it
Miller
was Miller
work.
Brothers, I believe,
Yes.
that I thought Miller work just meant that anything that was done in a ceiling, no, specifically.
Very specifically.
And local, and
That's right. Yeah.
local plaster probably came from the kilns on the west and east escarpment.
And this is to bring it back to the campaign. It's the kind of thing that you learn to appreciate as a candidate as you're walking the streets. That the city is actually quite remarkable.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the actual numbers of the election, because one of the things I noticed is that we actually had a very interesting election. that barely, a little over 1,000 votes separated the lead candidate from the bottom, or I should say the last elected candidate.
Yeah, you point that out just
Yeah.
at the front. I hadn't really looked at that, but that is interesting. So votes were cast across quite an array of ideas and opinions and people, which is, I think, pretty positive.
And I think it appears we've got the council that we had hoped, or we would hope for. The city has got an interesting reputation that it tends to replace candidates with two, three, four new candidates with new ideas to give a little yeast to the older candidates or the incumbents.
Well, in a perfect world, if you've got 9 councillors and you replace 3 every term, then you're keeping it fresh. And sometimes you've got somebody like Councillor Lemon that's around for a number of years and brings a lot of that depth of experience and knowledge that Peter had and shared. And he was really amazing that last council, because there was, I think, 4 or 5 that were new, that Peter had that institutional knowledge that, and I know he enjoyed it more than previous councils, because everyone kind of relied on him, and he had a different feeling of importance. But as people age out, it's nice to get the next generation in. A lot of decisions we'll be making are going to affect people that are 30 or 40 now. We're trying to plan long-term financially and with planning, etc. That's going to affect the community in many years, and it really affects some of the younger people on council more than it will affect me or Marion. So it's nice to get the younger people coming in and that next generation coming on to council for sure.
Sure. What did you, maybe this is an unfair question, I'll ask it anyway. What was the biggest issue you heard door to door?
Taxes.
Okay.
Fascinating. Out of 300, 400 people that I talked to, I got 1 on climate change. 1, only 1. As the campaign went on and the media started to pick up on it, then housing and homelessness, and there seemed to be confusion between housing and homelessness, but more people were concerned about the taxes are high. I had one really emotional conversation with somebody that we're trying to get the kids to hockey, and I'm working and my husband's working, and we're trying to pay our taxes, and we're trying to put skates on the kids, and we're trying to get them to school, and we've got to drive them, and she was just
trembling, perhaps.
Well, yeah, it was like really not angry, just
anxious.
Anxious is the word. Yeah. And I had that a few times. People concerned. Some, darn well that they can afford the taxes, but they don't want to pay them. But others that are like that are raising their kids, that are trying to make ends meet. That it's live grenades. It's real for them.
Sure.
And that really was a big message.
We'll get into that a little bit later, because I do want to talk about what that really means. One of the things that I have learned, I did a little digging around taxes, because when it started to pop up as the key issue, I discovered that the Munk Institute has got I think it's called the Institute of Municipal Finance and Governance or something. It's a subset of the Munk Institute in Toronto, and they have a number of very readable papers on property taxation. And one of the universal things that the people with the high foreheads, the bright people, have noted is that property taxes are the one tax we all love to hate, and it goes across geographic, national boundaries.
Yep.
And the reason, which is really curious, and I'm sure that people who are watching say, I hate my property taxes, is that it's the one tax that is most visible to us. It contacts us every month with a bill. Whereas if you compare it to a sales tax, well, let me give you an example. I just filled my truck with gas. The bill was about $80. a good chunk of that, or a portion of that, was HST.
And it's hidden.
And it's hidden.
Yeah,
I
fair
don't
enough.
see it. You don't see the tax on gas. You don't see the sales tax at the till.
So out of every dollar of taxes that you pay, 9 cents goes to municipalities through property tax. 60% of the infrastructure is, the cost is carried by municipalities. It's been downloaded over the years. Some of the Ontario highways were downloaded to counties and to lower tiers, that now we're carrying the responsibility for that. Certainly, the social services housing got uploaded from the province or to the province from the county a few years ago, went the other way. But yeah, it's property taxes that they see. So we get a BMA study, and I can't remember what BMA stands for, and out of 444 municipalities, there's 333 that participate. Our industrial taxes have come down into low. Our commercial taxes have come down into medium, where we want. For a bungalow, we're still high. Overall, our net levy per capita is still in the high category, but we've come down from 29th highest to 31st over the last couple of years. Over the last 4 years, our tax increases, the largest one was 2.59, 2.56, I can't remember. We had a 1.6 and a 1.8. Out of those 4 years, 1% in each of those years was dedicated to infrastructure. So over a number of years, past governments would look at operations budget first, capital second, so paving roads, and well, we don't have enough money to pay that road. And so they keep taxes low by not paving roads, and at some point, it's borrowing from the bank of asphalt. It's coming back to haunt you at some point, and now we're at that point. So including these low tax increases, that has included a 1% tax, we've been lower than just about everywhere else in Grey County, for example, that were 3.8s and 6.6s and 6.8s, and a lot higher. Town of Blue Mountains, of course, was lower than we were, but they've had huge growth and huge opportunities there. So we've managed to try and control our tax increases in our budget. And actually, in the 2022 budget, if you take out police, transit, library, I think those three, so it still includes fire, our budget actually went down 0.68%. So, well, that's hard to get that message out, but we have been controlling taxes, and we're going to have to keep doing that. I can't promise a tax decrease, but as long as we keep getting the growth that we're getting and helping that to manage our taxes, we can move slowly down as everybody bypasses us into the middle zone on the BMA study where we want to be.
It's funny, everyone quotes the BMA study, and rightly so, but I noticed, it was the Toronto Star, in the election campaign, they were looking at the various tax rates. And one of the comments that was made by BMA itself was these studies should not be used as a comparison. And I thought that was very curious, because, and I think what the point they were making is there are many variables between municipalities. So to compare A municipality with B municipality, you can't just use the tax rate. You've got to look at the services provided. You've got to look at
oh, certainly.
And I think that's our very useful caution for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing in a BMA study is they'll try and break down the taxes per capita. Is better than the other way they do it is taxes per $100,000 of assessment. So my bungalow at assessed, and I'm going to make it up, $400,000 could be 1.2 in Toronto, and therefore it looks like the taxes are 3 times higher than in Toronto. So that's a comparison that you've got to work your way around. But when we look at others that are sort of like us, do they have a bus service? Do they have, somebody recently did the comparison of Owen Sound and Collingwood, forgetting that we've got more employees because we have police officers here. There it's a contract for OPP, so there isn't as many employees. So, right there you've got to know the nuances to know how to make those comparisons.
And that's what happens when people look at the Sunshine List as well.
Yeah.
That's one of the other things. So it's not that you shouldn't compare, it's just that you need to be very careful in the comparison. And that's the point that I really appreciated that the Star article drew out. Well, Ian, we have to take a break.
Already?
Yeah. Hey, I haven't even touched page 2. Anyway, friends, I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking, and we will be right back.
Closed captioning is brought to you in part by Raven Reads. Unbox Indigenous voices. Subscribe today at ravenreads.org.
This is Rogers TV.
I was born and raised in Musqueam First Nation territory by my mother, who spoke Hunkaminam to me. As a child, I ceased using my mother tongue, as to use any language other than English was considered not being Canadian, so I was told. The old people came to me in a dream and reminded me of who I am and where I come from. I have reawakened. My roots are strong, and I'm no longer a silent speaker. My language tells me where I'm from. It defines me and guides me to teach others to learn and understand our culture and traditions. A gift for those in the present and the unborn generations. What was lost is found. What was asleep has awakened. My blood is here, and I am complete. I have returned home.
Are you the type who would keep going or stop? It's not easy to stop when you have an addiction. Legalizing cannabis won't stop addiction. It trivializes its consumption. Let's be vigilant. If you need help, visit portage.ca.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest is Mayor Ian Boddy of the City of Owen Sound. Ian, good to have you back.
Good, let's start that. Would you say page 4 to go? Page 8, how many pages?
Actually, I wanted you fully admitted you hadn't looked at this, but I do want to pick up on a couple of points that the province's announcement right after the election, which is what we call political timing, because they don't want to introduce big changes during a municipal election campaign. The More Homes Built Faster Act, which, and if anybody wants to see a summary of it, there's actually the province did a very good summary on their provincial I think it's the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Very readable. The thing I found interesting was that the operative words in this summary were the words consult, clarify, propose. Nothing about will, shall be. So everything is sort of vaguely said, this is what we want to do. But I thought what was really interesting is that 2 of the proposals, one of which is to reduce the property tax burden on apartment buildings, to consult with municipalities to reduce the current property tax burden on multi-residential apartment buildings in Ontario. And then another one of them, the ideas was ask 29 of Ontario's largest and fastest growing municipalities to pledge to address the housing gap over the next 10 years. That's not us, first of all. The top 29 growing communities would not include Owen Sound?
They would not include Owen Sound.
I wouldn't think so. So we can kind of put that one off to the side. But let's look at that idea of reducing property tax burden on apartments. And what they're basically saying is that the municipalities tax apartments the same way they tax single-family homes, and that is a disincentive to build apartments because you got to charge higher rents. What they want to do, I think, is reduce rents. Do you know anything about the tax regime, that particular part of the tax structure?
Well, I did not read the announcement yesterday as I was running around picking up signs and things, so I'm not just on top of that. Minister Clark was the mayor of Brockville when he was like 22, and then he became a CAO, and then he became a member of provincial parliament, and then Minister of Municipal Affairs, and man, he gets it. Like, he's just a fantastic guy and really understands it. So it will be well thought through with him at the helm.
My real question is...
residential gets taxed as a 1. Commercial gets taxed at a 1.6 such and such and such and such. Industry is 1.8. Multi-res walk-up, I think, is different than multi-res
high-rise.
High-rise. And so they will be taxed at a ratio more than a 1 at current. So what they will want to do is bring that ratio down to be closer, probably, to residential. We recognized, well, let me back up. We had an economist a couple years ago at one of the conferences tell us that here's a sky picture of an area of Toronto that has a shortage of housing. Boom. Here's a picture of an area of Toronto that has an abundance of housing. Same picture. So, houses in the market? No, hard to buy, really low. Number of bedrooms, really high. So as our parents would have bought a starter home, not had huge pensions, a home to raise their kids, and then a retirement home, our generation tends to be staying in our home after the kids have left, and sometimes it's a 3 or a 4 or a 5 bedroom house, and staying in it and retired because there isn't that middle housing that's available. So rental housing, condominiums, apartments, the houses on the flat, the little townhouses that don't have basements, etc., are that middle housing that they've been talking about that we need to allow people to sell their family homes to a family and free them up and free up. So start to fill the bedrooms. So abundance of bedrooms, shortfall of shortage of housing. So we know we're ahead. One of the statistics I looked at, 350 new housing units came onto the market within the last year. 300 of those were rental. There were only 13,000, we learned at AMO, only 13,000 new rental housing units in Ontario last year. One sound which is 0.1% of the population, 1/10 of 1% of the population of the province, had 2.3% of the rental houses coming onto the market in the last year. So we're batting way over our heads. So they're looking at the more need for post-war baby boomers, for rentals and for different sizes, and we've got a really good start on it, and hopefully we keep that going.
My concern is that if they're talking about cutting tax rates, somebody's not going to get revenue, and that will likely be the municipal level of government. And that's the big concern. I mean, you got choices. You can raise taxes or cut your budget. I'm being really broad here, but when you reduce your revenues at the municipal level, that is an open-ended question. Is the province going to step up and add more to the various payments that it makes to municipalities? I doubt it.
I wouldn't anticipate the province is going to make up that shortfall. I anticipate what they're saying is you're going to have to spread out that your tax increase is going to bring that one for houses up. So it's going to transfer from this segment of property to other segments of property it's going to transfer the costs out of rentals to other ownership properties, I think. Is the only way I can see it.
Well, what is the old saying? The devil is in the details?
Yeah, always. Well, and certainly, you know, that's been a hot topic is development charges. We waived development charges. In 2014, I think we had 6 or 8 building permits given out for any housing. So we waived development charges to try and get them going, and it worked, and I can't remember how many houses we got started the next year. Next time we looked at it, we waived them just on rental housing. So apartments, purpose-built, so apartments, so not condominiums, but apartments. And it worked, obviously, if we've got 300 new rental apartment houses that have come on. We will look at it again in January. I suspect that we will go more to a community improvement plan for an incentive versus a development charge, but that council will make that decision when it comes. And we'll start to narrow it again to just affordable and accessible, or attainable, I should say, apartments.
Sure. The other thing that's in the announcement, which is kind of going into the weeds, but you are well aware that public meetings have to be held for every draft plan of subdivision. Anytime you put a group of houses in, you've got to have a public meeting. The announcement proposes making that phase optional. And I can understand it if you've got a whole bunch of developments. I could see it in larger municipalities, but I'm not sure that lack of input would go over well in more rural municipalities or smaller municipalities, because people like to have their input. They like to stick their oar in on a development that's going to happen in their backyard.
Well, we've had one recently that we got. It missed the public meeting, came to the next meeting, and were heard. We have a lot of those meetings that nobody shows up and they've tuned out. Now, again, is this post-COVID or isn't it? For us to have a public meeting, like our planning staff are pretty good. Now, as we get busier, it's going to be harder for them to keep the same really short period of turnover going as we've had in the last couple of years. But it's, you know, we announce, I can't remember, there must be probably 30 days notice, I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
it's very short.
So I'm not sure that there's much of a delay by us having that public meeting. There maybe is, but maybe, I don't think it'd be more than a month.
We might need to remember Owen Sound is a pretty efficient municipality too. Yeah. And you've made that point on many occasions in council that the path through the city approvals is not difficult, or is just about as easy as you can make it.
Well, you talk to developers and they're a year and a quarter in larger cities, and they're 3 months, 90 days. You know, that's pushing it, but 3 to 4 months up here by the time they get to the counter. We get it, well, and that's partly we do. Owen Sound does something fairly unique in a pre-circulation.
Right.
Submit your report and we'll send it out and get everyone's feedback before you put it in and you have to make changes, so that they can actually come in with a proposal that's already, they've already got the feedback on it. So Conservation Authority, utilities, post office, for example, engineering, you know, does our Union Gas, is there sufficient utilities, et cetera, to that location? And then, you know, planning to make sure that it fits into the official plan and zoning and does it work for the community.
Well, I was impressed that I'm looking at the Flato Red Hawk area, that when Flato came forward with their development, there was an objection about drainage, and within 3 months, it came back, and in fact, you approved it. I think at the last meeting of council, the revised.
We revised Red Hawk. So Red Hawk
was
were
Red Hawk
there
that was
first.
Yes.
But where are they going to meet? At the street at 8th Street with Telfer Creek that's across to the north. And where's the all the water and wastewater
where's the water
the street's going to run with Flato that came in next door.
Yeah.
So these guys work together.
Well, that's right. I think they had the same engineer even.
But yeah, I think they did, and it's a lot of the parts is just, you know, get out of the way. So once they worked it out, then Flato got approved. Then they came back with Red Hawk. You know, just wasn't much of a shift, but shifting some of their stuff so the streets will line up and they're prepared.
Good stuff. Now this is the last part of the the proposal I wanted to raise with you, and that is I think it's a thing about red tape. Proposing to focus responsibility for land use policies and approvals in the local lower tier municipality. And that raises the question of, will the county have a role to play? It's probably the devil's again in the details, but you're just curious because it might mean more expanded responsibilities for the city.
Well, it won't for the city of Owen Sound. We're unique in that Owen Sound joined in approximately 2000 to the county. The county has an official plan. Owen Sound has an official plan that must fit into the county's official plan. We do our own zoning. We've got our own planning department. Across the rest of Grey County, the other 8 municipalities rely on Grey to do much of their planning, and there will be some local stuff. I don't know how that's going to work, how that is going to be more efficient in a sense. It will be interesting.
Well, I think what it'll mean is keep watching City Council.
Yeah, well, that's we're starting to think about some of the things that we ask a developer to do, some of the studies that they have to do, and are we throwing up red tape that maybe isn't always necessary? Prime example. The Skyline property that's proposed or has gone through site plan approval for RCA. No, sorry, it was zoning that came through. Site plan approval wouldn't be coming back to council, and Scott Gregg picked up on the fact that we're asking them to do a shadow study and a wind study. Well, the shadow study is going to affect the old Goodyear building. It's not like it's over a house that they're never going to see the sun again, so is that necessary? Some of those things we do automatically, but do we need to do it? Is that putting a certain expense onto the builder that doesn't need to be there? And maybe we transfer that incentive to make things a little bit easier in some of those reports and increase their development charges and some of those things, which is money that's going into our control, basically.
Sure.
So that's a very vague thought that hasn't been worked its way through and or has come to council.
Well,
but
tell you
to think about.
I won't hold you to this the next time we talk. Okay. But it's because it's current. That's why I'm asking, because I think it's really important that people realize this could have an impact on this city.
Yep.
And not just the city, but the county as well. So, and this stuff is being kind of announced, and because we have a majority provincial government, it shall be, by and large.
Well, you hear little rumors by somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody,
yes,
of course.
Of course.
And I almost wonder when they're talking about throwing things to lower tiers if at some point they're going to start talking about reorganization from the provincial level again. I've heard that there's an appetite at the provincial level.
And that raises the issue of amalgamation, and I can just hear the screams from all the way from the surrounding municipalities.
Well, it was a kiss of death for Bill Davis that went to a minority government in the 70s over it, and then the Mike Harris government did some stuff.
Yes.
That maybe, Kent Chatham, I don't know. Bruce County was ahead of us. They'd made a lot of their own decisions. Owen Sound was promised when we joined the county that they would relook at it within 10 years. Now nobody wants to look at it, but it doesn't make sense that our population at noon hour, during the day in Owen Sound's 40,000 with people paying taxes somewhere else and using the services in here. Yeah. Does that make sense? You have to draw a line somewhere, and where's that line? And
sure.
So I hope we can start to have that discussion again, and if the province is going to start leaning that way, I'd much rather have that discussion here in Grey County and make up our own minds before it comes down with a sledgehammer from Queen's Park.
Well, you may have a very interesting time at Grey County Council then.
Well, yeah, we always do.
and you and Scott Gregg will be yes. representatives to County Council.
Yeah.
And that is inaugurated in mid-November, I believe.
It's a blur. It used to always be December 1st, and
Yeah,
I know our
it's been
city
backed
council
up.
backs up to, I think, I was going to say June 21st, but I hope not. November 21st, and I can't remember when the county is. It's right around the same time.
Yeah, it's about the same time, and which leads me to another subject. The last meeting of the existing council, as it is constituted, is the 7th of November. I looked.
Yep, correct.
I looked at the calendar.
I was thinking it's this Monday, but it won't be. It'll be 2 weeks. It'll be
2
7th.
weeks, the 7th of November. Inauguration is the 21st, and where will that be held? Has that been decided yet? It was at, the voice in my head is telling me it'll be at the Harmony Center.
It'll be at the Harmony Center.
Okay, at least you agree with the voice, the voice in my head. That's excellent.
I
Thank you.
had heard that.
Yes.
It's going to be different. You know, certainly O'Leary did a good job at the county with housing, social services, addictions, all those things. We will lose Selwyn Hicks, who has been a wonderful warden that wasn't reelected.
Yes. Ross Kentner will be
Ross
on.
Kentner will be there instead of Barb. Akash is stepping down.
But Paul McQueen is returning.
Paul McQueen will be returning. Dwight Burley will be leaving, so there'll be changes. My mind, I'm looking around the table. Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble, Chatsworth is leaving. On this side, the mayor of Southgate will be moving on. The mayor of
Brian Milne will be coming back.
The town of Blue Mountains mayor is retiring, and the mayor of West Grey will be replaced by Kevin Eccles, who of course was there before.
And many of those people you'll be able to watch right here on Politically Speaking, because my producer Mark Perry is already lining them up for already into the new year. So we don't know who the new warden is, but we do know that some of the new mayors are going to be appearing, and looking forward to that, as well as there's a few guests that'll be a bit of a surprise. So when we talk politics, you got to also have a little surprise.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Politicians don't like surprises.
I know that. So just to let people know, you have 3 days of council orientation for new councillors and returning councillors, the 2nd, 9th, and 15th of December. And I think one of those days is a county orientation? Or is
that's what we've done. That's what we've done in the past. I think probably Integrity Commissioner comes in, go out to Grey Roots, and have an overall. So no use all of us doing it once and everybody, each time putting it all together. It allows people to rub elbows with other councillors and start to make friends with people in other municipalities, which is always good to break down those barriers.
Absolutely. And then the new council meets for the first time on the 12th of December, according to the schedule, and then on the 16th of January, because there's that holiday called Christmas and New Year's.
And then budgets start coming, and then development charge reviews start coming, and then, we'll be up and running fast.
Well, I was going to ask you, upcoming issues. You've said development charges. Budget will come up in the new year, of course.
Yeah, so normally we try and get the budget hammered out in the fall, but you can't in an election year.
No.
And the reason we do that, if the early we get things decided in the capital budget, the better chance you get of getting good contracts with pavers and people that are doing that.
For sure.
I don't know. I'll sit down with Tim Simmons, our city manager, in the coming days to start to look forward. We've got a service review that is in process.
Well, yes, I was going to ask you that. That's or operational review or service
service review.
Same thing. And when is that going to come forward?
Soon.
Soon? Okay.
Yeah, you couldn't throw that grenade into the middle of a election. So I have no idea what it says. We used federal funding, went out to an independent person that could come in and do an objective review and look at it from the outside with their experience of doing a lot of other municipalities. So we look forward to looking at that and see what reorganization suggestions they might make, etc.
And the waste contract?
Waste contract comes up in 2 years. So
2 years.
I think the survey is still, if you go into owensound.ca and go to I forget where it is once you're in there, where there's a chance to fill out that survey, and certainly blue boxes are being taken over by the producers. The province is pushing everyone to reduce what they're putting into landfills and trying to get more organics composted.
It's funny, I had that conversation this morning with when I was getting my snow tires changed, talking with someone who we talked about, of course, the election. And he was saying he's moved up from Toronto in the last 5 years. He says, I don't understand why Owen Sound doesn't have organic composting. And I tried to explain the cost and the facilities. And in fact, I even discovered something new, that Meaford has organic composting, but it doesn't have a transfer station.
Correct.
And I presume the cost of organic composting would cover the cost of a transfer station. You get one or the other, but not both.
Meaford's had that for quite a while.
Yeah.
Before I was in council in 2010, the council looked at it about 08. It was going to be something like 1.2 million to bring it in. We looked at it, I'm going to say between 10 and 14, and it was still going to be like a 2% tax increase just for that, and we didn't think we could do it. So now we've got opportunities with the blue box money being freed up. So yeah, that's going to happen the next 4 years. We want to do long-term planning, that we start to look at where the city wants to be in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and start to build our programs that aim in that direction instead of next year or 2 years. You know, now we're doing sort of 4 and 5 year budgeting planning, and that hasn't always been done. So trying to look further down the road at where we're going to be, and start to put together, well, strategic plan will come up again. Yeah, it's fun stuff. The main thing I want to focus on, and I've been saying it for years, is trying to keep, the good old days they called it attracting prosperity, and we haven't really called it that the last few years, but trying to get some jobs, some industry, this clean energy frontier stuff that's going on around Bruce Power, the hydrogen, hydrogen optimized, TC energy opportunities, the Meaford, we still want to call it the Meaford Tank Range, but of course the training center. These are all opportunities that we want to attract industry, taxpayers, industry, and jobs, and get the community back going in the direction that it was going in sort of the 60s and 70s, and rejuvenate and make this a place that you can afford to live.
With lots of houses.
With houses, and with that you can make a living at, that there's good jobs and prosperity. It comes back to that one word. So that's really what I'm hoping we can chase after hard in the next 4 years while we're doing.
And we haven't even touched on the unhoused.
No.
That's for another program.
And so I'm hoping for no COVID this term, no frozen pipes for 6 weeks, no arsons, just a nice clean 4 years to get things done. But life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, I guess.
Exactly. And thank you, Ian. We're out of time, but thank you for being a part of Politically Speaking. Congratulations on your victory again. And I can honestly say, like I say to our viewers, friends, we'll talk again. I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking. We'll talk again.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Hi, I'm Dave Carr for Politically Speaking on Rogers TV. David Shearman returns to this seat next week at this time. Politics, the entire conversation. It's Politically Speaking on Rogers TV.
Watching hockey just got a power play with NHL Center Ice and Super Sports Pack. With up to 37 out-of-market NHL games a week, you'll always catch your favorite team no matter where you live. Whether it's big match